Hello and welcome to this live edition of the Under Center podcast. Dara and Fionn here with you, looking at free agency and the first 3 days of it. Actually, officially the start of the new league year today, even though we had those 2 days beforehand called the legal tampering period, where basically all the deals were announced and done as if they weren't talking before Monday anyway to agree these deals. But anyway, we'll get in. There's no need to get into just specifics of that. Fionn, how are you, buddy?
Nice. Nice to be back on live. We haven't done a live show for a while, so back to our old ways and looking forward to it. A lot of stuff moving. Not going to pretend I'm on top of every deal that's been going through over the last 3 days. My Washington Commanders haven't been doing a whole lot. Nothing blockbuster anyway. So I've been nice and quiet on the socials. They've added a couple of linemen here and there, a couple of starters. I think from the Giants and maybe from the Vikings as well, if memory serves me right. But in general, nobody big, no big splashy signings. But look, we'll save that for the Washington podcast that we're doing at the moment. I'll go through all the stuff that we have signed, some of that stuff. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think now is when teams' seasons start to shape up, right? We're trying to get a sense of who's going all out this year, who's playing chess and who's playing checkers. And it's been unfolding slowly, but at a quite a nice pace. There's been some very interesting signings, very interesting deals done. So plenty to discuss for us, pair.
Yeah, and I should actually also mention congratulations on your first show of your Command Center podcast, which is a very good name. I know, your team is not great with naming themselves, but at least the podcast about the team is good.
Well, look, this is it. We're going to go through the season and I'm going to float a few different names for the podcast. I'm not settled, taking my inspiration from the commanders themselves. So eventually we'll go through, we'll pick a name that nobody particularly likes, but ultimately doesn't offend anyone, which seems like a very low bar to set. But hey, it got the Washington Commanders to Commanders, so maybe it'll get us. So I'm hoping maybe some of the listeners will be able to chip in, let us know which ones they like the best. Maybe they have some suggestions. I'm more than welcome. It can be kind of team related or something totally different. So it's something interesting that we're doing. Hopefully, we'll come up with something good. But I'm glad you like the first one. The first one out of the gate is always important.
Well, that's it, and it's always the toughest as well, and especially you're by yourself. It's kind of hard to get content going talking to yourself and having no one to bounce off. So I commend you for doing that. Very well done indeed. And make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, Under Center Podcast, if you want to watch more of Fionn's Washington Commanders show, currently titled Command Center, subject to change as always. We also have a Seattle Seahawks one with myself and Al that we've done. We have 2 episodes in the books already. You can check them out. There's a Carolina Panthers one there called Cat Call. With Rain, he's already has 1 episode in the bag too. So we have plenty of content coming for you in this off season, stuff that you will not want to miss. And we will also be looking at the local side of things too. Of course, we did a special North Dublin Pirates season preview last week, looking ahead to what was meant to be our very first game of the year against the Wexford Eagles. And I mentioned we would talk about it at the start of the show. So let's have a chat about it, Fionn. We were meant to play. We were all set. Well, I was all set to play. Unfortunately, you weren't able to. You were in coach mode on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Stripped, ready to go, gear on, gear checked by the officials on both teams. The Wexford Eagles sporting their new all black jerseys as well, which I have to point out are very tidy and very nice. So fair play to them for that.
Yeah.
And we're just standing around there at 1 o'clock, and we're wondering what's the holdup. Before we realize there's no ambulance. We had a phone number for the crew that was meant to look after us. They did not answer their phones. After numerous calls, they did not answer their phones. I believe we called then the original person we booked with, who was as surprised as us that they weren't showing up, which also is not great either. And yeah, Fionn, just a very, for all this build up to the start of the year, very disappointing way for it to finish.
Yeah, look, for anyone who doesn't know, maybe that's listening in that isn't too familiar with the Irish League, we are mandated to have an ambulance crew on site for any of the games. They are independent, outside people, normally volunteers. that we pay to come and look after us while we're playing the game, just to make sure nothing untoward happens. And if anything serious happens, we have the best medical treatment we can as quickly as possible to try and mitigate any of those risks. Look, they say, Dara, control what you can control. That's what we did. We were all there. We were ready to go. And look, these things happen. It's very unfortunate. It's not what we wanted. It's not what the Eagles wanted. They've paid even less than us last season, I believe. So, look, we're going to have to wait an extra couple of weeks. It'll let me get back to full fitness. Hopefully, I'll be able to take part in the first game. We're waiting to hear from the league. It is up to their discretion. Typically, if we don't have the ambulance crew as the home team, that is going to be our problem and might result in a forfeit. We obviously hope that doesn't happen. The Wexford Eagles, we know Coach Clatt there, very classy gentleman. We will try and play that game if at all possible. And we'll see what comes out of it. I think I must say, Dara, I agree with you. I think the new jerseys look very slick. The old ones were looking quite dated. I think the Eagles will be keen to take a lot of photos at the first game. They get to trot them out to kind of replace some of the social media stuff. Some very, very nice jerseys, I have to say.
Yeah, like you mentioned, as of now, we do not know yet what is going to happen. There is a few possibilities where we play them again in Santry. We could have to go and play them twice in Wexford. Like you said, we may actually have to forfeit the game. We don't know just yet what exactly is going to happen. It just means we're going to have to wait now another week and a half before we start our first. We get a proper start to the season. Of course, at home to the Causeway Giants. We will have a show next week looking ahead to that game as well in more detail. Hopefully, have some people on from the Giants as well to have the chat about that. But one more question before we move off and have a chat about free agency itself, Fionn. How did you feel yourself personally not for yourself personally, how did you feel for, especially like we mentioned, this build up that we've had all season? We finally got the players in place. The Eagles as well were building up. They finally had the players in place after not having much players last season, resulting in their forfeit. All these rookies just gearing up to start, and then this happens. It's not a great look for the league to see that there's an abandoned game. They were already up against it this weekend because we were the only game after the two other games were cancelled. Obviously, that has nothing to do with the league. The weather is the weather. We can't control that. But when it's something as inconspicuous as it should be, as getting an ambulance down here, to be able to be on time and having that, because of that, meaning that you can't play a game of football, it is tough to swallow, and it's even worse for the guys that are just looking forward to playing their first game ever, probably in American football.
Yeah, look, there's plenty to be disappointed about. I think we're going to have to try hard to see some of the good things about it. Certainly for me, it was a pleasure to see how many players we got up and kitted, having played through the last couple of years. We had very strong numbers pre-COVID and lost them over the course of the break, as a lot of people will know. Especially over last season, we struggled to finish out the season. So I think that's a big bonus. It was good to see that everything went. It was nice to get the pitch. The pitch was reasonably well marked, as you know, there. I had to run around, do a little quick paint job before the start. But I have to say, the groundskeeper did for the actual pitch. There was a couple of lines missing. But other than that, the pitch looked great. They did a good job to allow us to play. It would have gone ahead had the ambulance showed up. We would have been the only game. I think the thing I'm most disappointed with, Dara, is, as you know, we're in Division 2. That's the third of 3 divisions here we have in Ireland. So we were nominated by the guys in the Green Zone podcast to be the game of the week this week. So we were looking forward to that. I think as a Division 2 team, we might not get another chance to be the game of the week. There's a lot of good teams around Ireland. Maybe that for me is the biggest thing, is to miss out on that. Hopefully, if the game is rescheduled, they'll do us a favor and they'll let us be featured as the game of the season. That game this year, a new initiative is to try and get those all streamed online, or certainly the game of the week streamed online. So it's going to be fun. It's definitely a cool new wrinkle that the league has introduced with the help of the guys and all the podcasts, as there has been a couple of podcasts popping up around Ireland now focusing on the league and helping out not just ourselves and the domestic game and the Irish NFL show. So there's a couple of new podcasts going. So that's really cool to see. I think I'm going to try and take the positives out of last weekend, and that for me is the big positive.
Yeah, I had to give a shout out to Talking Balls podcast. They are the ones who run Green Zone. They very kindly had me on last week to look forward to the game and had a great chat with them. So make sure you check them out as well. One more thing, Fionn, before we don't ever try and take up a job as a greenskeeper or a lineman at all,
They were
because
not straight. They
the,
were not straight, but I didn't have anything to give me a line. It was purely by eye.
not straight,
I
not
do,
straight, pretty close.
and and on a bandy leg, as you know, so that's naturally going to make me limp a little bit, and it just was impossible for there. I did have Paddy assisting us. Thank you very much, Paddy, for your assistance. But as you know, that Paddy tends to get in the way more than he helps. So I'm gonna put squarely the blame on Paddy. I think that's fair. I think it's reasonable. You were there, you saw it, so no one else can prove me wrong. And yeah, I'm gonna fully and completely blame Paddy on this one.
Oh, everybody saw those lines. You could not see those lines. But I have to mention also, Coach Fionn was looking good, calling out those plays. I liked him. I liked the plays. I
Defense
like the
looked
play
strong.
call
We
that
had
we
a
had.
little scrimmage. Defense
Yeah.
defense looked strong. I was happy.
Yeah, well, it always looks strong when you have your main anchor in the defensive line, like right here, you know? So that's
For
when you have
sure.
me,
For
that's all
sure.
you need, baby. That's all you need. It's not totally not to do with our absolutely massive nose tackle who is going to destroy every single person he comes up against this season. It has nothing to do with that. It's all about there. All about there. And the play calls from Fionn as well. But look, listen, let's move on and talk a little bit about free agency. And it is actually an interesting day to talk about it because a certain quarterback that always has questions about marks about him every year, whether or not he's going to stay with his team, actually gave a definitive statement on the Pat McAfee podcast today. That is, of course, Aaron Rodgers, who said today his intention is to play for the New York Jets next season. It's all coming. The only thing that's left is compensation. They talked a little bit about before the darkness retreat, and he mentioned that he was 90% sure he was going to retire before going into the darkness retreat. But then when he felt the goalposts were shifted by the team in terms of the reports that were coming out, he wanted to play. And he's decided that he's going to want to play in New York with the Jets. It looks like the saga is nearly ending, Fionn. Obviously, the compensation has to be dealt out. I think 2 first-round picks is the quote at the moment, which is a lot for a late 30s, was he 37, 38-year-old quarterback. That's a lot to pay for, considering if you pay the same, you can get Lamar Jackson. But Fionn, your initial reaction to Aaron Rodgers looking like he's off to the Jets?
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed this one. It was one of those ones that slowly unfolded. Aaron Rodgers, as he has a way of doing every off season, creating a narrative, despite his insistence that he doesn't want to be anywhere near any narratives of any description. But he seems to end up in them every single off season. I did like that it went from where could he go, and slowly as the different pundits around the league sat down and really analyzed who had the capital, who could actually be interested, who had the team around them that might entice them, who had the market around to entice them. I think it slowly became the Jets, and I'm kind of happy as a AFC team. We don't come across them too much on the Washington Commanders side of things. I know they've had a lot of misery. The Browns managed to pull themselves out by the bootstraps. It's gone a little bit sideways on them the last couple of seasons, but they did a good job getting out of where they were. And I think the Jets can do the same. I think they've got probably 3 years of a really good Aaron Rodgers. If they're lucky, that might be enough to get them through. I don't know if first season out of the gate they're going to be really Super Bowl contenders. I think they're probably playoff contenders. Aaron Rodgers, up until last year, was always my favorite anytime he got into the playoffs. And then last year he didn't manage to get it done, which is a little bit against the trend that he had. But I think it's a strong move for the Jets. I think they will need to keep an eye on not breaking the bank. Like you said, 2 first-round picks, I think is huge. The reports I heard was that they probably wouldn't require 2. I think 1 first rounder is probably reasonable enough. Because at the end of the day, not only do you have to keep an eye out on future quarterbacks, because he's not going to play forever. He's already, as you said, well in his 30s. You got to also make sure that you can keep the team around him, the core around him, strong, whether that's young players or free agents. And the best way to do that is through the draft. The Jets have been unreasonably good at the draft, I would have to say. Last year, they had a huge haul of picks, and they seem to hit on quite a lot of them. A very strong team, very quick turnaround. So yeah, it'll be interesting. What do you think? Do you think it's a good natural fit, or do you think it's the Jets going out and getting the best possible free agent quarterback that they felt was on the carousel, and they're just going to kind of hit and hope that he slots into the core of players that they have there already?
I think this is something that they had to do. It's gone one end of the scale. So for the last few quarterbacks that they've had, if you look at Zach Wilson, Sam Darnold, who's before Sam Darnold in New York? We'll just use
Mike
those two as an
White.
example. Anyway, Mike White was there too, but they've gone for young guys that they've drafted high. It hasn't worked. So let's go the other end. And let's go for a veteran near the end of his time who has been MVP 3-4 times in the league. And let's see if we can do it with him. Which is an interesting way to go. It might work. It might not work. I think it's interesting that they're signing his quote unquote favorites at the moment. Alan Lazard is joining. Randall Cobb is a name that's being heavily linked. I mentioned it on Twitter there today that I would not be surprised to see Jamal Williams rock up there either.
That's a good show.
He obviously was with the Lions last year, but he was with the Packers before that. And Aaron Rodgers has always said him and Williams have had a really good relationship. Although they do have Breece Hall coming back coming back from injury, who was electric. And actually kind of tore the Packers apart when the Jets beat the Packers in Lambeau this past season as well. What will that do for Garrett Wilson then? Elijah Moore, Denzel Mims, what's going to happen with them? So it's interesting. We'll see. And obviously Nathaniel Hackett is the OC over there now, which is interesting too. Obviously he's OC over in Green Bay. I also mentioned on Twitter that the Jets are lucky that they already play in green, because if Aaron Rodgers joins them, he'd probably want them to change their colors to green as well. So we'll see.
I heard Joe Namath's going to let him use number 12 as well. But as you were saying though, Dara, I think Lazard's a good son, and I actually like him. He was one of the only wide receivers who could catch a ball over the last 3 years in Green Bay. I think Randall Cobb is maybe a step too far. I think that's maybe pandering down to Rodgers a little bit. He's quite old. I don't see his versatility. You listed off not DJ Moore.
Elijah.
What was Elijah Moore and Mims as well. They're fine at that kind of 3-4 slot wide receiver role. If you've got Garrett Wilson and Lazard, I think that's a pretty good 1-2 combo on the outside. So I think Cobbs is a little bit surplus to requirement. I think that might be a step too far. Certainly, if you're going for it, I wouldn't be going and paying him too much money. I'd be kind of going, do you want to ride Aaron Rodgers' coattails? Here's the vet mean, in you come, we'll get you in for a couple of plays here and there. Maybe when we need a third down or a fourth down, and Rodgers better than anyone else who's on the pitch at the moment. Beyond that, I don't see a whole lot of value in adding Cobbs, I have to say.
Yeah. Before we go back to the Green Bay chat, I have to pop up this comment here very quickly from Griff. I'm going to push you back in this season. Griff, Griff is obviously, this is from Trinity. Griff, as much as you would like to, because I know you had a great game against the Giants, I don't play offensive line, so I don't know how it's going to work. Now, if you want to play offensive line against me and see if you do that, let's try. I think it'd be fun. But look, listen, that's obviously Trinity have had a great start to the year. Fantastic for them. Actually, they play Wexford the week after we play the Causeway Giants as well. So it'd be interesting to see.
We share a ground. I think it's going to be good crack. I like those kind of comments. Hopefully both their teams can play well. We play them at the end of the season. So if we can have both of us playing in our home grounds with real wins on the line and really good seasons in their back pocket, I think it's going to make for excellent football. I wouldn't be surprised that actually if that makes us onto game of the week, an all hometown derby, a Dublin derby in the same ground 2 weeks in a row. I believe we play them twice at the end of the season in a row, home and away.
Yeah, in May. And I had the chance to speak to Griffin on Sunday, and unfortunately he told me he won't be around for one of them. So maybe if we meet in the bowl, you get your 2 games against.
I guess, Sarah.
Yeah,
So if he
that's it.
locks us up on one, they're going to be wide open on the second game. So I'm not too worried.
No, we're looking forward to Griff's one of the good ones there as well. So it's always good. Thank you for tuning in as always. But on the Rodgers thing, I want to flip it over to the Packers now because Jordan Love is the, I guess, QB1 there at the moment. He did mention it in his Pat McAfee interview that they drafted Jordan to be his replacement. I'm not so convinced that Jordan's going to be the replacement. I think if they get the compensation that they want of 2 first-round picks, they already have their other first-round pick as they would have this year as well. I see them using that as a package to move up in the draft and go after one of the quarterbacks. I think.
Well, you've got to go up really to third, don't you? You got to go up. You got to flip
third
to
or
Arizona.
Fifth.
I think
I'd say
fifth
third
is
or
too
fifth.
late. I think there's only, from what I've heard, there's 4 guys that could go in the top 5. I think most teams are comfortable with 3. That being obviously Stroud, then Young, and then what's the young man from Florida's name?
You have Richardson and you have Will Levis as well.
I think so. I think Will Levis, though, something tells me from the things I've been hearing in the background that he's rated slightly below. He would be the least of the 4 picks. So I think if you've got your eye on one of them, you're going to have to go ahead and get right up into Arizona because you can't afford. There's too many quarterback needy teams up there. You've got the Colts. There's plenty of other teams in and around that 1 to 6 zone that you're going to have to get up over. So I think Arizona is the number one way. Are they going to be interested? Do they rank the players high enough to be able to, or do they rank Richardson high enough to go and get him? I don't know. He's certainly impressed on his pro day, but pro days, as we know, don't always translate. In the combine, they will have his pro day. So let's see what happens. I think it's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if it's a good move for them or not. I really don't. So I don't trust Love. I do think they're going to have to find something else. I think they've had enough time to look at Love, and they would have played him by now if they could have. So yeah, I'm a little bit nervous for the Packers.
And he had that one. He had the one game against KC as well, against Mahomes, and everyone was praising him because he kept them in the game and stuff like that. So, look, we'll see. It's all right coming in for a game or two and getting ready for that single game. Let's just see what happens in a full season, and if they do stick with him. I still think that they're going to try and move up. Look, they may take someone else because obviously there's ones further down in the draft as well. I think Hendon Hooker is a name to look out for in the later rounds as a potential quarterback to pick up. Hey, if you want to roll the dice and take a shot on Stetson Bennett, he won a natty last year with Georgia. You never know.
Yeah, with his little noodle arm.
Well, look, he still won it, and he still is a decent.
Did you see the side of his tight end, Darren? No wonder he won it. The tight end nearly threw him across the line.
Who was that? That was Darnell Washington, wasn't it?
Washington, he's
going to be a good pickup this year.
He showed out at the combine.
Yeah, he's going to be a good pickup this year for sure. But look, we can talk about draft later on. Few other notable free agent sort of pickups, I guess, over the last little while. Javon Hargrave is going to the San Francisco 49ers, part of a somewhat exodus, you could say, from the Eagles. They are now, it's not confirmed if they are definitely losing him, but Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is gone as of
Darius
now. He hasn't signed a new contract. Darius Slay has been released. They tried to trade him, couldn't find a trade partner. James Bradbury has signed a new contract. He's staying. They've lost TJ Edwards, who's gone to the Bears. They, like I mentioned, Javon Hargrave. They've lost Miles Sanders. They have lost. There's another one on that defense that they've lost as well. Marcus Epps is gone too. So it seems a bit of an exodus. There's some Philly reporters are trying to say, look, lads, it's all okay. It's all part of the plan and stuff. But they lost their OC. They've lost their DC. They're losing players. It's at this early stage, it's not looking great. Jason Kelce, I should also mention, is staying. He signed a 1-year deal. He's not retiring too, which I say is vitally important as well for them too. But especially as because the Eagles are a team in your division, Fionn, I guess it's a little encouraging to see so many players leave.
Well, look, it's part of the party of the NFL, right? Like once you start doing well, your coaches go off to try and become head coaches. Your free agent signings, your big free agent signings, go and look somewhere else. A lot of guys have performed really well. So I think it's time. It's a struggle, right? When you sign a lot of excellent free agents, which they did, you're gonna have a lot leaving. I think we're seeing the same with the San Francisco 49ers. They've been kind of decimated on defense as well. I'm sure as free agency goes along, they'll sign some more guys back again. Not necessarily the same guys that have left, but you know what I mean? They'll rebuild the ranks a little bit. Don't know necessarily if I believe, oh, it's all part of the plan. I think it's all expected, maybe is more the best way to phrase it in terms of the Eagles. I don't know if you can ever plan to lose a lot of key guys on one side of the ball as opposed to a couple of guys spread out across your team a little bit. So look, the Eagles will try and sign the best they can. I'm was cautiously optimistic about the Eagles last year that Washington will be able to overcome them. I was significantly wrong on that. So I'm not going to hold my breath and say that a lot of free agent losses are going to bring them any closer to the Washington Commanders this season. The Washington Commanders also have a lot of work to do in the offseason to try and build a competitive team. A couple of good teams came out of that division last year. The Giants, who've re-signed and been fairly quiet so far. They haven't lost anything too big. They've added Darren Waller to the offense. He's going to be a threat. I think tight end has been a problem for the Giants the last couple of seasons. So look, the Eagles in general, it's always going to happen when you get to the Super Bowl. A little bit of a hangover. That's why it's so hard to make it back 2 years in a row. Never mind if you win it. So it's expected. I think it's the way that it goes. It's the cycle of the NFL. But I'm sure they'll be fine. I don't expect them to have lost so much that they'll instantly drop back to the back of the pack. I think Jalen Hurts, as you said, and Travis Kelce, that's two huge key pieces of the offense, and they're still in place. So we'll see how it all plays out as the free agency season rolls through.
Yeah. On the AFC side of things, on day one of the biggest spenders was the Denver Broncos. And they have spent a lot of money just on their O line alone. The likes of Ben Powers and Mike McGlinchey coming in to help out, obviously Russ and the rest of that offense. On the flip side of that, though, they are shopping a lot of their wide receiver talent, including Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, and KJ Hamler. They're looking for at least a first round pick for Jerry Jeudy, is the latest I've seen. One funny thought that I had though with this, I don't know if you noticed about the Mike McGlinchey signing. Plays right tackle. He's 6'9". Russ, of course, is 5'10". I feel sorry for whoever plays on that right side of the right side wide receiver, because Russ is never going to see him with Mike McGlinchey there covering him the whole time. So it'll be a lot of throws to the left, I'd imagine.
Yeah, look, it's a dangerous game to play. I know a lot of people putting a lot of faith in Sean Payton. My instinct leaned the same way as it leaned the last year. Everyone said when they signed Russell Wilson, this was going to game change the Broncos, instant Super Bowl contenders. I feel like the narrative now is a little bit the same for Sean Payton coming in, and I'm not so sure. I think it's a dangerous game to play when Russ is underperforming last year to come in and get rid of some of that offensive talent. I did see one analyst point out last season that it's kind of the Payton way where he feels like he can get by using his scheme with some kind of lower, let's say, second tier talents at the skill position. I'm not sure he has a quarterback good enough at the moment in the Denver Broncos. I will have to be proven wrong about Russell Wilson if I'm to believe that he still has it in him to perform and drag this team along. And we saw even Dara, and you bore witness to this, even in the days where you could say he still was showing good football in Seattle, he definitely lost that ability to hold them and drag them through despite the performances of the players around him, especially in that year prior to when he left. And I feel like if he doesn't have enough talent around him, it's going to be a big problem. And they might have excellent protection, but if they don't have really top tier guys for him to throw to, I think it may cause problems in the future. So that makes me a little bit nervous watching the Denver Broncos. But as I said, I am slightly down on them just because of what happened last year, just because of the hype around Russell Wilson. So maybe it's my bias rubbing off a little bit. What do you think? Is this a policy that you sign off on, or would you agree with me and say this is maybe a little bit premature to be getting rid of your top wide receiver talent when Russ hasn't played well since he's got there?
Yeah, see, I thought it is an odd one. Is it one of those things, maybe, when a coach walks in the door and he says, look, listen, if you don't want to be here, tell me now before we start getting into things, and then we'll try and find a home for you. And maybe that's what they're after saying. Look, I can't play here anymore. I don't want to. I want to move on. But see, now, there was rumors about Jeudy last season before the trade deadline as well. So it seems as though he's been wanting to move for a while. Cortland Sutton actually tweeted there last weekend, I think it was, or was it just before free agency started, where he says, I just want to be somewhere where I'm loved or where I'm valued. I can't remember the tweet exactly, but so there is some discontent in that wide receiver room. Look, if they get what they want, like, I don't believe a first round pick for Jeudy is probably what they're going to get. Maybe second, maybe. But with Cortland Sutton, I don't know how. I don't think you could get, maybe if you get a third, I think you're doing well with Cortland Sutton. Not that he's a bad player. It's just
they've all suffered a Wilson hangover.
Yeah,
he hasn't made them look good.
Yeah.
I think if you get Jeudy for a second rounder, which I think is possible, I think that's a steal. I really do. I remember his combine coming out. He's a top talent at wide receiver. Sutton, I agree with you. I think he's certainly good enough, but he has had to suffer under Russell Wilson, and I don't know if people remember enough of his good play to trade a second rounder or a first rounder. Definitely not. So yeah,
Yep.
I think they're probably looking at a third rounder, and KJ Hamler as well. He's another new guy in the league. He hasn't been able to show a lot outside of some. Is this his third year in the league? I think he was there before.
Yeah.
Russell Wilson arrived, so he struggled with the quarterbacks before, and then he had Russell Wilson and his season last year. Look, it's going to be difficult. I think they've devalued their wide receiver core a lot. I did stories out last season about how Russell was rubbing up that the dressing room the wrong way, and a lot of lads weren't particularly happy about his style of leadership or the way that he likes to conduct his NFL business. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised maybe if you're right on that one, that there's a significant chunk of players that don't really want to be there anymore. And maybe it's not all Sean Payton's master plan. Maybe it's him adapting to the scenario that he's walked into.
Yeah, that could be it. Listen, we don't have much time left. I'm going to ask you about two teams that have been the most active so far. I want to get your point of view and see how you think they've done. Because when teams spend a lot of money in free agency, it's seen as a kind of a desperate play. The Jaguars were guilty of it for so long. And they overspent when realistically they should have been maybe drafting talent and maybe focusing on the coaching tree being correct. But the two highest spenders, I think, so far outside of the Broncos have been the Falcons and the Bears. So looking at the Bears, first of all, they have brought in Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, two linebackers from Buffalo and the Eagles, respectively. Especially Tremaine Edmonds has got an absolutely massive contract. They brought in the guard Nate Davis from the Titans. They have also brought in, who have they also brought in? I should have checked this out. Is that all they brought in so far? I think it is. Oh, Travis Homer. That's what it was. The former Seattle Seahawks running back has come in as well because David Montgomery is gone. More of a special teamer maybe than a starting running back. On the Falcons side of things, they have brought in Jesse Bates, the safety from the Bengals. They have re-signed Caleb McGarry to a massive contract as well. Caden Ellis, they've gotten in from New Orleans. And of course, your former quarterback in Washington, Tyler Heineke, has come in at the Falcons, probably to challenge Desmond Ridder for that starting QB job. And of course, they traded as well for Jonnu Smith for a 7th round pick from the Patriots as well. Your thoughts on those two teams? Have you liked the money they've spent? And especially now added, I should also add it to the Bears too. They did trade away their first round pick for a heap from the Carolina Panthers of first round, second rounds, and DJ Moore as well. So you can add him into the acquisitions too. A really good acquisition there too. But what do you think about those two teams' moves early in this offseason?
Yeah, the Bears are the one that really stood out to me. Two stud linebackers that added to an already pretty good defense. The offensive side of things, DJ Moore, I think, might be one of the best acquisitions that they could get out of that trading out of the first position in the NFL draft. That's key. I think the wide receiver position let them and Justin Fields down a little bit last year. I think if Justin Fields can stay healthy, they've made significant improvements. I wouldn't be surprised to see them jump up significantly this season in terms of win percentage. For the Falcons, a little bit nervous. I know they also signed, I think they spent 80 million on a safety as well. Like his name, I forget his name, unfortunately. But yeah, I think they're building around Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder, to me, has a little bit of a whiff of Jordan Love about him. I'm not sure we've seen enough good football that can let you build around it. But of course, we've seen some teams at the moment move away from those huge quarterback salaries that are going around for kind of that secondary, third tier of quarterbacks where you still got to pay nearly 20-40 million dollars for a per year for these guys. I think they're moving away. They're working around their cheap quarterback and they're really building a team around it so that hopefully I think they're going to try and maneuver some cap space over the next couple of years to really either draft in the next quarterback that they fancy or go and get a quarterback in the next free agency cycle. So yeah, I think the Falcons certainly are spending a lot of money. I don't know if it's, as you mentioned, the Jaguars. I don't know if it's to their extent. I don't think it's panic stations. I do think it's calculated, but I don't think they're necessarily going to see the immediate return on their investments as the Bears will, just because I think Justin Fields has found his game very well last year, and I think I'm expecting it to progress a little bit into this year. Desmond Ridder has not done that yet, so they'll have to hope that he finds his game along the way this season in order for them to really benefit from all the money that they're spending in this offseason.
Well, they're eighth in the moment at the draft. Do you think they would move up and possibly look at one of those quarterbacks?
I don't know. It really seems to me like they're going to go ahead and just go with Desmond Ridder. I think they brought in Taylor Heineke. You haven't seen what he did in Washington, knowing that if Ridder really is suffering, they have an 8-8 guy, right? A guy that you want your quarterback, that a backup, I beg your pardon, that can play as a starter. He maybe doesn't have the ability to drag you into the playoffs as Washington have seen, but certainly in terms of being forced to play with a backup, I think he's been very well. I don't think there's a lot of teams that could have coped the way that Washington did with their starters going down at the rate that they were and having Heineke step in there and play well for them. Certainly, they could have helped them out a bit more. We all know his limitations, but if you've got a coach and staff that can take advantage of those limitations or mitigate those limitations a little bit, I think you'd be all right. So I think that's a good move for them. I think they're definitely keyed in on Desmond Ridder. That's where I feel like their attention is and they've brought in a strong backup then as well. That if things do go a little bit south or he does need a little bit of a dig out, they have a kind of a tried and tested guy off the bench that they can bring in who can certainly keep them afloat if need be.
Yeah. For me with the Bears, I really like what they've done. I really like that they have focused on getting some really talented defenders, especially in the linebacking position. There, a couple of years ago, the Bears were a really, really mean defense, and I'd love for them to go back to that. They still need to get. They got Nate Davis. They still need more on that offensive line. They're in, I think, position 9 at the moment. That's where the trade with the Panthers left them. There is some really good offensive linemen in the first round to get in the draft, so hopefully they use that pick for one of them. The Falcons, I'm not sure about just yet. Jesse Bates didn't have the best of years last year. Hopefully he can rekindle some sort of form. AJ Terrell didn't have a great year in the cornerback position last year. Hopefully he can get back to playing well. Like these teams are building. The Jonnu Smith one was weird for me. Trading for him, especially now with Kyle Pitts. I'm not sure why they would do that.
He's a blocking. He's more a blocking tight end. I think maybe they're just bringing him in for a kind of heavy set look, maybe a 2 tight end, run one way, pass the other way, kind of RPO,
yeah.
where you've got a blocker on the backside and a pass catcher on the front side. Maybe that's what they're
Yeah. Well,
thinking there.
I think though, like especially in this draft as well, because there's so many really good tight ends in this draft, particularly I think it's the best tight end class they've had in a long, long time. Trading for Jonnu Smith and the contract that he has with the Patriots was a bit weird when you can get one of the rookies and have them as a blocking tight end. I thought would have been better. But hey, look, listen, that's just me. But it'd be interesting to see. Those are the two sort of biggest spenders sort of along with the Broncos so far this offseason. And we'll see what happens. And of course, when the draft comes along. And the last 2 years, I haven't been really into the draft, but this year I've obviously because the Seattle's 2 picks in the first round, I'm really interested now in the draft and seeing what happens, especially obviously around 5 and 20 and what they're going to do. But we are going to wrap up this edition of the show. Fionn, as always, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
We'll be back again next week and we'll talk a bit more about free agency and any other moves that happens and when we have a bit more time before we go. If you aren't already subscribe to our YouTube channel not at Under Center, just Under Center Podcast. Subscribe, be kept up to date with all the shows, like our regular show here and our shows looking at specific teams like the Seahawks, Commanders, Panthers. We'll be getting some Giants shows in there as well and stuff. Listen back on the podcast, Under Center Podcast, wherever you watch your podcast or listen to your podcast, you'll find us there. And thank you to everyone that listened to the last show as well. The Pirates Preview was our best show yet. Hopefully we can keep that going and we can keep getting those listens in at Under Center Pod on Instagram, Twitter. That's where to follow us. We'll keep you up to date with all the shows there too. But like I said, that is all the time we have for this week. Until next time, stay safe and we'll see you soon.